The Monroe Doctrine isn't just history anymore. It's back. It has teeth, and it just redrew the map of Latin America in 3 weeks.
It really did.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We are looking at a massive, just a rapid shift in how the Western Hemisphere functions. Since January 3rd, the map has effectively been redrawn.
It's a whole new world. And honestly, if you've been glued to the headlines, you know the big story. Operation Absolute Resolve.
The raid in Venezuela. Yeah.
Right. But that military operation, the helicopters, the special forces, that was just the opening ceremony.
That's the movie version. But we are here to dig into the actual research, the intelligence reports, the trade data that tells the real story.
And that story is not about the military action.
No, not really. It's about money, it's about oil, and it's about a new strategy the sources are calling the Trump Corollary.
It's the operating system for 2026. The sources call it transactional realism.
Yeah.
And it's a very blunt, very effective way of viewing the world.
What does that mean, exactly?
It basically says, we aren't here to hold hands or build democracies. We are here to secure resources, protect our own border, and, well, kick out competitors like China and Russia.
And the rule is simple. If you want to do business in the Americas, you play by our rules.
Exactly. And if you don't, well, we saw what happens.
We certainly did. And we're seeing it play out right now with our news hook. There's a breaking story with Mexico that just perfectly illustrates this whole new reality.
Yeah, it involves a ship with a very sci-fi name, the Swift Galaxy.
Sounds like something from Star Trek.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a massive crude oil tanker. It was sitting in a port in Mexico, loaded down with about 300,000 barrels of crude.
And where is it going?
Destination on the manifest was Havana, Cuba.
Which, for the last year or so, has been pretty standard, right? Mexico has practically been keeping the lights on in Cuba?
Keeping the lights on is literal in this case. The data we have is just.
Oh.
It's staggering. Under President Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico became the absolute lifeline for the regime in Cuba.
How much of a lifeline are we talking?
In 2025 alone, Mexico sent roughly $560 million worth of oil to Havana.
$560 million. In 1 year.
Yep. To put that in perspective, that is 4 times more oil than the previous Mexican administration sent in 6 entire years. They stepped in to save Cuba because Venezuela, had collapsed.
So the Swift Galaxy is loaded up, ready to go save the day again, but it never left the dock.
It did not. Pemex, Mexico's state oil company, suddenly just canceled the shipment.
And this wasn't some kind of mechanical problem. This was because of a post on Truth Social.
It was that direct.
Yeah.
President Trump didn't use a diplomat. He didn't send a letter. He just posted, in all caps, you couldn't miss it, there will be no more oil or money going to Cuba zero.
He didn't just yell, though. He pointed a loaded gun at the Mexican economy.
He went right for the jugular, the USMCA. That's the huge trade deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada.
And there's a review coming up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The 6-year review is scheduled for this July. Now, usually that's just a formality. Everyone shakes hands, they sign the paper. But Trump turned it into a weapon.
The message was what? Cut off Cuba or the deal's off.
Crystal clear. You want access to the American market. You want to sell your cars and your avocados here. Then you do not subsidize our enemies. It's a binary choice.
Your ideology or your economy.
And President Sheinbaum did the math. She tried to play the humanitarian aid card. But when the threat to the USMCA became real, she folded. The Swift Galaxy stayed put.
And that right there is the first pillar of this Trump corollary. Your sovereignty is respected, but only if you aren't working against U.S. interests.
That's the transactional realism. Mm-hmm. Mexico's solidarity with Cuba just wasn't worth destroying their economy over.
So that's the pressure tactic. But let's go deeper on the main event. Venezuela, this wasn't just pressure. This was a full demolition.
Oh, yeah.
Operation Absolute Resolve removed Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. But reading through these intelligence assessments, the raid itself isn't the most fascinating part. It's the cleanup.
It's the day after plan. Yeah. And this is where the strategy gets really, really interesting.
Because we didn't just hand the keys over to the opposition, did we? We didn't call up Maria Corina Machado and say, okay, the country's all yours.
No, we didn't. And there is a very specific reason for that. The reports mention a classified CIA assessment that basically said the opposition leaders, as brave as they are, were not ready to run the country.
Not ready how?
They didn't have the leverage. Not with the military, not with the police. The assessment was that if you just handed them the government, the country would dissolve into warlordism. You'd have chaos, a failed state.
And this administration doesn't want a failed state. They want stability.
Stability is the product. So they decided not to hand over the government. Instead, they They took control of the one thing that actually matters in Venezuela,
The oil.
the oil. The U.S. is now effectively marketing Venezuelan oil directly. We're talking about 30 to 50 million barrels.
Okay, walk me through this. The U.S. government is acting as the sales department for another country.
It's more like a receivership. The U.S. Treasury, through OFAC, is managing the exports. So if a refinery in India wants Venezuelan crude, they don't pay Caracas.
They pay us.
They pay into a U.S.-controlled escrow account. The money never touches Venezuelan hands.
Not as cash, anyway.
Right. And this is the brilliance of it. It's an oil for food program, but run by Washington, not the UN. We sell their oil, take the cash, and use that cash to buy American-made food, medicine, equipment.
And then we ship those American goods down to Venezuela.
Exactly. It's a completely closed loop. Think about it. It stabilizes the humanitarian crisis because people get food.
Yeah.
It benefits American farmers because they're the suppliers. And this is the big one. It kills the corruption.
Because you can't wire transfer a crate of Kansas corn to a Swiss bank account.
You got it. The generals can't steal the money because there is no money. There are only goods.
Yeah.
It's brutal, but it is incredibly efficient.
And it serves a huge strategic goal, too, right? Because by controlling the oil, the U.S. has kicked China, Russia, and Iran out of the hemisphere.
Completely. They were the ones financing Maduro. China was taking oil for debt. Iran was swapping chemicals for fuel. Now, that's over. The source material calls this removing non-hemispheric competitors.
Which is a nice way of saying, get out.
It's a hostile takeover of a country's assets managed by the U.S. Treasury.
So normally, with coups and military operations, the stock market panics. You'd expect to see red arrows everywhere. But that is not what happened.
No, it's the opposite. The markets are actually cheering.
Why? Do they suddenly love military interventions?
They love certainty. Under Maduro, Venezuela was a black hole. It was chaotic, unpredictable. By the U.S. stepping in and taking the wheel, Wall Street sees stability. They see a manager they can trust.
So Venezuelan bonds rallied.
They did. And other Latin American currencies actually went up. Investors, it turns out, prefer a U.S.-imposed order over a sovereign mess.
Stability is profitable. Chaos is not.
That's the rule.
Okay, so Venezuela is in line. Mexico has been, well, bullied into compliance. That brings us to the third domino, Cuba.
If Venezuela is the earthquake, Cuba is the building that is about to collapse.
We talked about the ship being canceled, but is it really that dire for them? Can't they just buy oil from someone else?
With what money? They're completely broke. For 25 years, Cuba has survived because Venezuela was their lifeline. But look at the numbers. Between 2023 and 2025, Venezuelan exports to Cuba had already dropped by 63%.
Because their own industry was falling apart.
Right. By late 2025, Venezuela was only sending about 9,500 barrels a day. That's nothing. That is barely enough to keep the traffic lights on in Havana.
Which is why Mexico was so critical for them.
Mexico was the only thing keeping the regime alive. Now that Trump has cut that cord, Cuba goes to zero.
Zero energy.
Zero. Their power plants run on crude and diesel. Without that oil, the grid dies. Refrigeration stops, factories close.
I saw a quote in the research from Representative Carlos Jimenez. He asked if it was okay to nudge them over the edge.
That is the sentiment in Washington. They aren't planning an invasion. They don't need to. This is a siege without soldiers.
You just starve them of energy.
Exactly. The analysis is that the Communist Party is at its weakest point in 65 years. The strategy is to just keep the pressure on until they either collapse or they surrender and beg for a deal.
It's an existential crisis for them.
It is. I don't see how the current leadership survives the year. The math just doesn't work.
The speed of this is just amazing. Venezuela falls, Mexico retreats, Cuba is on the brink. But this strategy, it isn't just economic. There's a psychological part, too. The sources call it escalate to de-escalate.
This is a classic Trump negotiation style, but for geopolitics. And the best example is what happened with Colombia.
Right. President Gustavo Petro. He's a leftist, a former guerrilla, very critical of the U.S. You'd think he'd be leading protests against all this.
He wanted to be, but Trump moved first. Before Petro could even organize a summit, Trump went on TV and publicly called him a drug dealer.
That's aggressive.
It's a massive insult. And he didn't stop there. He hinted that if Colombia couldn't control cocaine production, maybe the U.S. military would have to come in and do it for them.
A direct threat to their sovereignty.
A huge threat. It's shocking language. But look at the result. Did Petro fight back?
No. He picked up the phone.
He called Trump immediately. And this is the pivot. Trump takes the call And then he tweets that they had a beautiful conversation and praises Petro's tone.
So you hit them with a hammer to get their attention, then offer a handshake once they're on their knees.
That's it exactly. You escalate the threat to the maximum, make them fear for their survival so they are desperate to de-escalate. Once they're willing to talk on your terms, you make the deal.
And it worked. Petro went from being an adversary to setting up a meeting at the White House.
Because he saw what happened to Maduro. The Venezuela operation proved the threats aren't bluffs anymore. When the U.S. says all options are on the table, leaders in Latin America now believe it.
The bluff is gone.
Completely.
Yeah.
And that changes the calculation for everyone.
There's another interesting little note about Greenland. It seems like a tangent, but does that fit into this strategy?
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
The Trump Corollary isn't just about Latin America. It's about the whole Western Hemisphere. And the administration is pushing hard to secure Greenland.
Wow.
National security. They want to make sure China and Russia cannot get a foothold in the north. No Chinese airfields, no Russian ports in the Arctic.
So whether it's Venezuelan oil or Greenland's ice, the rule is the same. This is our neighborhood.
Correct. It's a Fortress America's mindset. We are locking down the hemisphere. We control the resources, the trade routes, the security. No foreign adversaries allowed.
It redefines America first. That's not really isolationism, is it?
No, and that's a common mistake. Isolationism is building a wall and ignoring the world. This is aggressive regionalism. It's deep engagement, but strictly on U.S. terms.
Transactional realism. We keep coming back to that.
We do. And if you're an investor, you have to look at this map differently now.
How so?
Well, the biggest variable used to be local politics strikes, bad laws. Now the biggest variable is, are you aligned with the U.S.? If you are, you get stability and protection.
And if you aren't?
Then you get the Swift Galaxy treatment. Your ships don't sail. Your economy stops. Or, worst case, you get the Maduro treatment.
It creates a very clear incentive structure.
It does. And that's why the markets like it. They see a consolidated block where energy, food, and manufacturing can move freely without interference from China or Russia.
So, to bring it all home, we are looking at a completely redrawn map. In just 3 weeks, the U.S. has effectively seized control of the world's largest oil reserves, forced Mexico to change its foreign policy, and pushed Cuba to the brink.
It is a masterclass in hard power. It's ruthless, it's efficient, and it is undeniably effective.
The Trump Corollary basically tells the Western Hemisphere the U.S. is the boss again.
That's the bottom line. It's a return to a very old-school power dynamic. We aren't asking nicely anymore.
And the rules are align with U.S. security, align with U.S. economic interests, or face the consequences.
And as we saw with Mexico, even our biggest partners have to fall in line.
It's a fascinating time to be watching this. We've seen the U.S. take the oil, clear the board of enemies, and bring markets to heel. But here's the question I want to leave you with. We're seeing energy and trade used as weapons of compliance.
It certainly works.
But here's the thought. If your entire economy can be turned off like a light switch by a single post on Truth Social, does national sovereignty in the Americas actually exist anymore? Or is every nation just a tenant living in the landlord's building?
That is the question of the decade. And right now, the landlord is collecting rent.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll be watching closely to see what happens next. See you next time.